All right, today is the launch day of the brand new lian-li O11 Dynamic Evo, because evolution. It says it right in the box. I swear, this is like case week on Jay's 2 cents. That's fine, we're gonna get through all of it. You know, if you can't upgrade your graphics card and stuff, there's other things you can do with your system. And you obviously, we have a video about that coming out actually, things that you can do with your system other than graphics card updates. But cases are fun because it's the thing that you look at all the time. So you gotta enjoy it. But now, let's talk about the Evo here. This is the next generational improvement to the world's most popular case. I mean, the O11 Dynamic is, without a doubt, the most popular case we have ever seen. And that's just evident when we do our, you know, Jay, Nick, and Phil react to your setups. We've literally not showed certain setups just because they were O11s. Not because we don't like it, it's just we don't want it to be a 15-minute video of one O11 after another. If you have an O11, it's possible we saw it, we liked it, but we skipped it because we were looking for something different. Der Bauer and the guys at lian-li have spent a lot of time sort of seeing where can we improve the dynamic? Where can we make some customization? Where can we give the user choice on layout, configuration, airflow options? They took a lot of feedback, not just from the original O11 Dynamic, but also from the prototypes that were shown earlier this year. Now, this is the gunmetal version. I specifically requested the gray one, so there you go. And the cool thing is it's the gray outer panels, but black interior and black chassis frame. So it looks so good. Like, look at the backside, right? You see this two-tone gray-black? I love this already. Now, on the outside, it's gonna look very, very similar to a standard O11 Dynamic. However, the Evo is specifically about customization and modularity. That's where all of these boxes come in right here. These are the additional kits that you can get to customize stuff. So we've got an upright GPU bracket. Yeah, so you can have the GPU mounted upright, more vertical. This is the vertical mounting kit, which would be like more towards the bottom, where you've got the GPU mounted, you know, vertical, pretty standard. Additional IO kit, top IO kit, and front mesh kit. So we'll be taking a look at those after we see what comes in the box standard. So the box of accessories here is gonna have a few different panels and such in here. This is the hardware or hard drive mounting bracket that mounts down where the rear fans / radiator would go. You get one for each side. This gives you a place to mount additional hard disks or SSDs without having the mounts on there permanently, which are gonna affect airflow and such. So this is removable based on whether you need it or not. We'll show you where that goes inside in a second. This is extra screws, Velcro straps. Hey, look, the Der Bauer. Normally that's on there by default. You know why they didn't do that? I'll tell you why they didn't do that. And this shows the level of thinking juice they have in their heads. If you invert this, you invert that, and then you make the Der Bauer logo upside down. So this is completely convertible. You can invert it and make it a left side case so that the panel's on the opposite side, everything's upside down. And if you did that, the rear Der Bauer logo would be upside down as well. So once you figure out the orientation you want everything in, then you stick your Der Bauer logo where it's designed to go, and the lian-li logo, obviously, so it's not upside down. Let's talk about the front buttons. Things have changed here on the front side. So you can see here, we've got our power button right here. And then on the sides is where we've got our fan controller. There is a fan controller built in, as well as an RGB controller built in. So those are right here on the side. You can see that we've moved the USB-C, USB 3.0, and the multi-port headphone jack. So that's the 3-prong like you'd use on the phone, to the front separate from this. And the reason for that is depending on the orientation you have this case, right side or left side, that's still accessible. But if we take a look at the very bottom, we've got mounts here and here. So we can take this guy. Did I mention it's a nice snug fit? We've got this screw right here that retains the wires. We can now change, and we would need a little bit extra slack, which you can get by opening up the inside. We can change the location of this so that it's always facing the side you want it to face, where you want it to go. And we have a screw retention hole right there, and we got a screw retention hole right there, and right there, so that this wire, these wires for the USB are always gonna be mounted down. That way you don't have them sitting there flopping around underneath the case. You'll notice now this is where there's some changes. Extra ventilation here, because there's no such thing as too much ventilation. 120 millimeter fan mount that has a bit of room for sliding up and down. Dual power supply mount, which is something they had gotten rid of, but brought back. So that's a hot swap cage that allows you to put 2.5-inch drives or 3.5-inch drives on there. But if you remove the cage entirely by removing these 4 screws, you now have a place here where you can put in tandem PSUs if you need to. That's not something I feel most people would really need. Honestly, this is not a dual PC system, so you're not gonna be putting an ITX build in here and an ATX build, which could potentially need 2 power supplies. It's just, they give you the flexibility to do it. All right, so taking the top panel off, it is entirely mesh, as you can see. There is no fan filter here, which I am perfectly fine with, see? Because this should always be an exhaust. There should be no reason to limit the airflow of your exhaust because dust is not being sucked in by these being intakes. It's exhausting, so any dust sitting here would get blown off as well. What I also think is interesting though, is we have these screws right here. I like how they just use screws as their slide mechanism to retain. But we do have this small piece right here as well. So you can take this main one off to get your glass off, which is gonna pop outward, because the original glass just slid downward. It just slotted in. Now it goes out and up to reveal our tinted tempered glass side panel. And the rear is still fully mounted because of the fact that we have this piece right here, which is just an additional, I think I unscrewed it too far, yeah. This is just an additional piece. But you might be asking yourself, what is that piece all about? That box looks mysteriously similarly shaped, doesn't it? So this is that top IO kit. So what this allows you to do, and you can see that it's funny how that one has the shape right there too, this retention piece, but there's nothing there. This one allows you to actually take the bottom USB ports that I showed you, remove them from that box, mount them in here, and then if you so chose for them to be, this would end up being where your USB ports are, if you want them to be there. I feel it's an awkward position, because it's kind of like centered, which is really weird, but it also perfectly lines up with the center channel right here, which is another major redesign inside the chassis in terms of cable management. I'll show that in a sec. This is just showing you once again the amount of modularity you have. Now that we've done that, we can pop this piece out, slide it up, and then you can see the dual mesh. It's fairly fine mesh. Air does flow through it, but it's pretty fine mesh. So, I mean, airflow is still gonna be somewhat restricted through this, but not as restricted, obviously, as if there were a solid panel right there. Right off the bat, you can see things are quite different back here. If you've taken a look at the inside of a standard O11 Dynamic, and if you haven't, you can go and watch the video where I built a water-cooled version of the Dynamic for my daughter in a white case, where we showed all this back here. There's some changes, specifically with this guy right here. So now because we have the hard drive cage here, which has mesh on the cage, as well as mesh here, hard drives, SSDs do get warm, so it's good to have them not get trapped with heat as much, get some radiating heat outward there. So 2 more 2.5-inch drive mounts, but if we remove this guy, look at this channel that you have here for routing cables. So little minor correction here, this is just a hard drive cage, it's not hot swappable. Typically when you see the sleds like that, I think it's hot swap, plus the Dynamic XL. These are a hot swap cage, which has the cables and stuff, so just correction there, this is not hot swappable. That's perfectly fine though. Once you remove that, now you can see, like, this particular area right here is awesome when it comes to cable management. It's first of all, it's part of the chassis, so it's really rigid. Second, it's big. A lot of case manufacturers like to give you this little channel where you're supposed to fit 2 PCI Express cables, a 24-pin cable, potentially SATA, fan wires, maybe some RGB, maybe you've got a ton of fan headers because you have a fan controller in here somewhere, and then you start to realize real quickly they don't all fit in the channel, then they're too thick, then the panel won't go back on, and you start to just go, what the hell's the point of this channel anyway? Nothing fits in it, you run things next to it, which then makes the channel itself completely useless. This is really deep. As you can see, all the front panel connectors for the case are already in here, and I can like stick my whole hand in there. I mean, I don't know, how many J hands can that fit? I don't have little hands either. So there you go, you can fit a J hand in there. This right here is pretty awesome. This is actually a pump mount. This is already the right size to be able to fit something like a DDC pump or even a D5 pump on here if you wanted. It's also a support for your power supply. So if you had the power supply up here, you could still fit a pump and stuff down here, giving you a pretty awesome way to hide the pump and some cables or some tubes back here if you didn't use the integrated distribution blocks, which are super popular for the lian-li. In fact, the lian-li case, the O11 itself, has made distribution blocks popular for other cases because so many people were getting a simple off-the-shelf part that just mounts in here seamlessly and gives you all the ports you need and even an integrated pump. Other brands started offering third-party support for distribution blocks for their cases because of the popularity of people doing it here. The downside is, in my opinion, it takes away some of the creativity you have because everything's already pre-routed for you and you're usually just using one pipe with a 90-degree bend. Can look kind of boring, but at the same time, super sleek and clean. There's nothing wrong with that either. Speaking of super sleek and clean, one of the things that this particular chassis is known for is the vertical mount right here for fans and radiators. You can fit a 360 millimeter radiator right here. And you can also, like I said, fit a distribution block here. My daughter's O11 Dynamic has a distribution block right here with a pump built in. But the cool thing about this is before, the way you measured and mounted the depth of that was you had different mounting holes. You had to unscrew it and you could slide it forward or slide it back. So this is a button, spring-loaded button. This now swivels, slides out, and you can take this bracket, flip it around 180. Now you can see we've moved this back more flush with the back wall. Now you can have the fans and the radiator on the inside. It's not gonna really make a difference in terms of cooling. It's just, again, some flexibility. If you're gonna be using like a thick radiator, moving the whole thing back will allow you not to have it so far forward intrusive inside the main chassis area itself. If you do not plan to use that area there for fans or radiator, because you can still potentially mount something on the front. A lot of the lian-li cases do offer, you have the bottom intakes. So if you wanted, you could have, and this is how my daughter's layout is, 3 fans intaking on the bottom, a radiator on the top, and you just have this bottom to top or rising heat kind of airflow, which makes perfect sense. The front at that point isn't even necessary, but you can replace it with this bracket, and this bracket comes with it, and this gives you additional mounting locations for a whole bunch more options. Anything you need to mount, whether it be RGB controllers, fan controllers, additional SSDs, additional hard drives, and swapping it out takes literally as long as me showing you in real time how long that takes to put in. And I just grab that cable, there we go. So now we could mount more stuff there. But as you can see with that being flush, SSDs would mount right here, no problem depth-wise. Hard drives wouldn't. So if we were to flip it around 180 like I showed you, now we have plenty of depth here to add. 3.5-inch drives, big, like if we want to get like 10 terabyte drives or something, you're using this as like maybe some sort of an integrated server with a VM or something running while you have a regular system going. You have tons of storage right there. And if we look at it from this side, you can see it's fairly flush with the, well not flush, but it's making that back panel look a little more solid. This top piece here for mounting radiators does actually have a removable bracket. So you undo the screws, it comes out, you can mount your fans and your radiator to it, mount it back on the top. It's a lot easier than trying to finagle everything in here with it being part of the chassis. That's not really any different than the way that the dynamic works. Down here is quite a bit different though. You've got this piece, which again is a thumb screw that retains it. It just pops out. You can work on this independently. What I love are these half moon notches. Do you know what that's for? It's for having a place to put your fan wires through. So you're not having to pinch wires accidentally or finagle them to try and figure out where you're gonna route them. It is to be able to have wires go through there without a problem. If you don't want to use this at all, you could take it out, just make it more clean, have all exhaust fans at the top, and now you're just dealing with pure negative pressure, but it will pull air through the bottom and anywhere else there's ventilation. So you'll notice we've got these screw holes here, here, and here, 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 and here. So what that allows you to do is to take these and you can screw them down. You have a place now to add more hard drives. You do still have the wire channels here that you could use to make things look nice and neat through there. And then in terms of fan support, it does support 120s and 140s on the bottom. So all of this comes with the setup. Like this comes factory with every single one of these cases, the dynamic Evo. What I'm gonna show you now are some of the optional pieces, because this is where things really start to get exciting and become a little bit out of the box. You can, like I said, take this motherboard tray and flip it inverted if you want it. What that allows you to do is make your case now a left side case. So everything is reversible. You can take this and mount it to the other side as well. Everything is screwed on. It is not rivets. So anything that is designed to move and be reversible is completely unscrewable. So it's just standard Phillips head screws. This is the additional I/O kit, so you can add more. So you see how we have these USB ports right here? We could even add another one right there. So we got USB here and USB here. Ow! Every expansion piece also comes with an instruction set, a destruction set showing you how everything gets installed. And I love the fact that it's illustrated, because illustrations make the world such a better place. This is obviously designed to replace the tempered glass on the front of the case. If you're the kind of person that's like me, that goes, you know what? I just want all of the airflow possible. That's exactly what you get with the front mesh kit. So there it is, all mesh, which is kind of cool looking, even if you don't have fans right there. Just the fact that you have the extra airflow. And if you just love the industrial look of this all just being gray and just beefy mesh and such. So the rails just mount to these screws that are already in here on the chassis, and they are designed to mount recessed slightly. So that's where we would put them for 120s, and then we could scoot the right one over, and that's where it goes for a 140. So like you can see right there, you can mount additional radiator and fans to it if you want. I think this is something that I kind of wish that it came with by default, was this mesh kit, because I think a lot of people might want that. But you know what, I guess the nice thing is, instead of them having to manufacture two versions of this case and be like, here's a mesh version and here's a glass version, like so many brands are doing, it's everything is the glass version. And then for those that want it, you buy the kit. I have no idea what it costs, honestly. That's the downside, is there's additional cost to it. And then you say, here is your mesh kit, and you have the options now to mount it. The last two accessories we have here are the different GPU mounting kits. So we've got a vertical GPU kit and an upright GPU kit. Let's go ahead and take a look at the vertical kit first. All right, so it doesn't say if it's PCIe Gen 3 or Gen 4, it's at least a Gen 3. It's also noting, which makes perfect sense, this is only gonna work if you're using the normal orientation. If it's inverted, that's not going to work. You unscrew, as you can see right here, all of the screws that it lines up with that you need to use. And I believe the top one doesn't come off. And then these holes are all held in place here vertically. So right now it's set up to be able to accommodate a triple slot graphics card. And that's what I love about this vertical bracket. A lot of vertical brackets are only offering you 2-slot compatibility. Now, especially with 30 series cards and how hot they get and the power demand of 3080s, 3070 Ti's, 3080 Ti's, a lot of them are triple slot. Now, one of our biggest complaints is we showed a lot of them do not actually have 3 IO bracket tabs to support the weight. But 20 series cards definitely did. 6900 XT, 6800 XT, custom cards are all using triple slot. So that allows you to make sure that's compatible. But if you don't want your card to be quite as recessed and you're using a dual slot card, you can move this over 1 slot. Undo the screws, move it over to these 2, mount it down, and now you won't see this empty slot right here in front of your graphics card. That'll fill that in. And it will push it a little bit closer to the sidewall. But the nice thing is, because we're not using what a lot of brands do, which is this area right here, a lot of brands will use this mesh to go, oh, we should just put a vertical card there. Then it's too close to the glass. Then you don't get as good of an airflow to your cooler on your graphics card. Then your graphics card starts throttling, because even though you have good airflow, if the volume of air in front of the fans is not great enough and it's being squished off by the glass, it's still gonna thermal throttle and overheat. Now this one's gonna be interesting, because it's like lian-li has figured out a way to utilize the motherboard ventilation, and they've made that a location where you can actually mount your graphics card. So you can have fans blowing directly on your graphics card. So essentially the way our graphics card is gonna look is like that, which is a really neat place to put it, because if you move it away from anywhere you're exhausting the heat, right? Because this is a founder's card, obviously, so half the air blows straight through the cooler, and that's gonna go into the chassis. Half the air here goes out these exhaust vents out the rear of the case. So I've seen other brands make it so you can mount them like inside the case fully and stuff, but that's just creating a weird situation where all this heat is kind of being recycled through it. But if you have fans right here blowing directly on the card, that's gonna make it pretty unique where you're able to get cold air blowing directly on it. Now, the only thing about the Founders Edition card that's gonna make me concerned, depending on the orientation, is this fan is pulling air through like that, right? So the air travels front side of the card to the rear. So if we do that, and those fans are blowing in, they're gonna be like competing. But for a standard card that has regular fans, that's not gonna be a problem whatsoever. So it gives you an extra long riser cable because you need to be able to reach your motherboard. There's a long one, you can take my word for it right there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right there on the top, 1, 2, 3, 4. Which brings us to a point that we were kind of talking about off camera a second ago, is lian-li has incorporated the provisions for all of these secondary parts that are available for modularity without being intrusive in the design if you're not using them. If you had like exposed brackets and big holes that are visible with threads and stuff you're not using, that's ugly. We don't even notice these mounts are here until you look at the instructions and you go, oh, that's where that goes. So there it is mounted right there. It looks a little wobbly because I don't have the bracket on here. It does obviously have a bracket that's designed to grab onto the GPU, if you will. I believe it goes kind of like that. And then it mounts to the rear tray, so I would have to flip that around. And it looks like you're supposed to use this one with it, which even if you're supposed to use this one, I would find a way to use the fans because I'd still rather have fans blowing directly on it. But check that out. Now you have this completely different way of mounting your graphics card. And like I said, that would go on there, that would hold onto your card. It would clamp on using these 90-degree brackets right here. And they do have these rubber isolators, so you're not scratching up your card. These will just double stick on there. Then you're good to go. So this is my Maximus Extreme EATX motherboard, and as you can see, that's clearly not gonna work because it's wider than the base. And sure, I could mount this on there, but I would not be able to use the upright GPU bracket because of the fact that, well, all these plugs come out at a 90 and clearly there's no room right there. The other thing you need to keep in mind, so standard ATX only, EATX with the upright bracket isn't gonna work. You could use EATX without the upright bracket. It's just gonna look weird too because the graphics card's gonna, or the motherboard's gonna overhang the tray right here. You do have this notch right here that allows you to pass a cable through. So if you're gonna be plugging in a monitor cable or something, part of the build needs to be having your cable plugged in, routed out along the top right here and out this grommet, and then coil up the rest of it. Then when you're ready to plug in your system, that gets routed to your monitor. So you're not gonna have a quick plug on the back of the computer anymore, specifically for your graphics card. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if lian-li came out in the future with some sort of an adapter that plugs in right here. That's just a DisplayPort 1.4 extension that plugs into that, and then you have that. That just adds another point of failure though, but that's just something worth pointing out. It's kind of like, when I use the 928 or something like that, I've got to take the rear panel off and everything to plug it in. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but it's the price you pay for cleanliness. It's cool because the biggest, and that's not a pun about its cooling, the biggest downside to chassis or cases is you always have to make a trade-off. There's always trade-offs that have to be made. There is no such thing as the perfect case. As you just saw, this one would be out for my personal build because this is the motherboard I'm currently planning on using. And if I wanted to put the graphics card right here, then this is a no-go. I don't think I'd put the graphics card there personally. I would probably fill that area up with water cooling, but then I would still have a big chunk of the case or the motherboard overhanging where the case kind of cuts off. So that would look kind of odd, personally. So it's one of those like, well, if you're gonna use this, then it needs to go in a big case that's designed to have something this wide put in it. So anyway, a huge thanks to lian-li for allowing us to have a day one look at their new O11 Dynamic Evo. This is the successor to the very popular Dynamic. You can see now options galore. They had options with the other one, but now you have options galore. And it's just so well thought out. I mean, you got a name like Der Bauer behind it. I mean, Der Bauer is an enthusiast, not just overclocking enthusiast, but a PC enthusiast. He likes cleanliness, he likes clean aesthetic. So it's pretty obvious that, you know, nothing in this case is an afterthought or an oversight. Everything is here on purpose. The fact that all this extra support is already built into the case and none of it is even noticeable or visible until you go to use it. So aesthetically, A+. Air cooling wise, it's very similar to the standard Dynamic, only now with the mesh panel and the fact that you can add fans to the front makes it even that much more amazing for air cooling. And then obviously for water cooling, there's no reason, I mean, my daughter's O11 Dynamic with water cooling, it keeps everything super cool, and that system is overclocked because water cooling and overclocked go hand in hand. What are your guys' thoughts on this? I guarantee lian-li will be reading the comments. Most of what you see here, if not all of it, is through direct consumer feedback, not only on the standard Dynamic, but also the prototype that was public, giving people an opportunity to speak up and say, hey, we'd like to see this, or we don't like this, and they listen. So sound off in the comments below how you guys feel about this case, and whether or not this is worthy of a build for us. Do you guys want to see us do a build in this? I know the answer is yes, it's always indefinitely a yes. But is it worthy enough for you to build in it? Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, we'll see you in the next one, which is tomorrow.